Hello, my name is Molly O'Connor, and I'm doing my final presentation for Global Health, HPS 433. I am currently a senior at the University of Arizona, majoring in public health with an emphasis in global health. So today we're going to be talking about the legacy of colonialism and the health impacts on Sri Lanka. Colonialism involves one group exerting power to dominate and exploit others. Colonialism leads to large-scale, systematic human and natural resource extraction and exploitation. Colonialism can be globalized financial and corporate colonialism manifested through financial deregulation, enhanced intellectual property rights, known as knowledge colonization, and tax avoidance facilitated by deregulated transnational corporate practices. The transformation of societal institutions that were once public into financially driven and privatized entities can also be considered modern colonialism. Colonialism in Sri Lanka began in 1815 by the British. Prior to that, they were invaded and occupied by the Portuguese, Dutch, Danish, and the French. In the 19th century, the island of Ceylon was developed into a heavily industrialized, highly profitable plantation economy that exported mostly tea. This was by the British. Colonial trade led to slavery and environmental destruction. And Great Britain implemented a divide and conquer strategy that accelerated and exacerbated ethnic tensions between the Tamil and Sinhalese communities. Sri Lanka achieved independence from Great Britain in 1948. Which led to some problems. I would say that there was a civil war that was a complex humanitarian emergency that officially started in 1983 in Sri Lanka. Their main ethnic populations are Sinhalese, the majority at 82%. The Tamil were at 9.4%, and the Sri Lankan Moor at 7.9%. The Sinhalese primarily practice Buddhism, while the Tamils primarily practice Hinduism. Significant linguistic and religious divisions existed between the two groups, and British colonial rule exploited the divide. The British Empire forcibly relocated Tamil workers from India to Sri Lanka's Malayaha, pardon my pronunciation, region, creating a controlled labor force linked to plantations. From 1823 to 1849, an estimated 160,000 people died during their forced journeys. Following independence in 1948, the Sinhala majority denied the Malayaha Tamils citizenship and basic rights, which perpetuated poverty, displacement, and discrimination. The war officially began in 1983 and lasted almost 3 decades until May 2009. So they're really still recovering. An estimated 100,000 people were killed, though the actual number of casualties is believed to be much higher. There isn't a lot of documentation because it was an insurgency a lot of the time. So there was the National Army and then the insurgents. So there was lots of fighting going on all over at different times. 40,000 Tamil civilians were killed in the final months of fighting alone. An estimated 1 million people were internally displaced because of the war, and over 35,000 individuals remain internally displaced. Following independence in 1948, the Sinhalese, resentful of what they saw as British favoritism towards the Tamils, disenfranchised Tamil plantation workers and established Sinhala as the official language, creating barriers to employment and education for the Tamils. In 1972, the Sinhalese renamed the country from Ceylon to Sri Lanka and declared Buddhism the official religion. The Tamils lost the right to vote. Ethnic tensions escalated. The Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, LTTE, more commonly known as the Tamil Tigers, formed in 1976. They were led by Villupillai Prabhakaran, and they advocated for a Tamil homeland, a separate state, in the northern and eastern parts of Sri Lanka. In 1983, an LTTE ambush on an army convoy killed 13 soldiers, which sparked riots that resulted in the deaths of 2,500 Tamils. So it was escalating. In 1987, India deployed a peacekeeping force in Sri Lanka and left in 1990 amid rising violence. The LTTE became known as the terrorist organization due to their use of suicide bombings. Both sides have been accused of child soldier recruitment and violations of international human rights. Norway brokered a ceasefire in 2002 that lasted through 2004 amid tsunami devastation that caused 30,000 deaths on the island. The conflict was reignited in August 2005 after the assassination of Sri Lankan Foreign Minister Lakshman Kadirgamar. In the last few months of fighting in 2009, the largest number of civilian casualties were documented, and it was widely condemned by the international community. So all of this affects the current mental health status of populations of individuals in Sri Lanka. High proportions of depression and anxiety, 41.6%, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD was at 46.7%, expression of somatoform symptoms, 13.7%, and psychosis with hypomania, 17.6%. All of these were found, these results were found amongst participants in a study that took place in the northern province. The area is associated with prolonged displacement and exposure to natural disasters. Participants in this study were predominantly internally displaced adults in the post-conflict area of the northern province. Findings indicated a high unmet need for access to mental health services within primary care facilities in the region. Factors such as female gender, unemployment, low education level, loss or injury to family member during conflict, low social support, and inadequate social networks were significantly associated with increased odds of screening positive for mental health disorders. So there's a great unmet need for mental health care in Sri Lanka and access to mental health services. Economic collapse. In 2022, Sri Lanka's economy collapsed due to heavy debts, COVID-19 pandemic-related reduced tourism, and rising commodity costs. The country faced imminent bankruptcy and struggled to afford essential imports like gasoline, milk, cooking gas, and toilet paper. Sri Lanka's crumbling economy and lack of agricultural planning, they get a lot of food exported in, have left 6 million people, nearly 30% of the population, food insecure. 4 million have lived in poverty since 2019. And in October of 2022, 42.9% of children under 5 had some form of undernutrition, growth faltering, underweight, wasting, and stunting. The trend was seen in all ages under 5, infants aged 1 to 2 years old, children aged 2 to 5 years old, and in all sectors, the urban, rural, and estate sectors of the country. That was seen. Currently in 2024, food insecurity remains high according to the World Bank, and the poverty rate is at 23.4%. The economy in Sri Lanka is now on track for growth, so it's a little bit more stable, but macroeconomic stability is fragile. High inequality persists, and rising rates of stunting and malnutrition may worsen spatial and generational disparities without effective compensatory measures and sustained growth. Socioeconomic disparities exacerbated by the recent economic crisis can lead to increased non-communicable diseases prevalence, particularly among vulnerable and marginalized populations. The total population in Sri Lanka was estimated at 22 million in 2022. The island is experiencing an increase in the prevalence of diabetes and prediabetes, which affects 20% of Sri Lankan adults aged 20 to 79. And 1/3 of those with diabetes have not been diagnosed yet. Non-communicable diseases such as cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, cancer, and chronic respiratory diseases account for 83% of the total deaths per year. With the demographic transition and the increase of an aging population, the burden of non-communicable diseases is likely to further increase. As Sri Lanka undergoes modernization and urbanization, there is an increasing trend of sedentary lifestyles, proliferation of fast food outlets, and changing dietary patterns in the country. The direct and indirect contributors to non-communicable diseases include rapid unplanned urbanization, unhealthy diets, global sedentary lifestyles, and an aging population. Globalization pressures lower middle income countries to adopt Western socioeconomic and healthcare models, which can lead to the uncritical adoption of Western lifestyles. That includes increased consumption of fast foods, sugary beverages, and food high in saturated fats. So the recommendations that I have come across to decolonize global health are: all global health actors must recognize and address structural power imbalances by following guidelines that promote equity, prevent unethical practices, and ensure mutual accountability. Aid agencies and private foundations from high-income countries should be evaluated for their funding practices to prevent the reinforcement of unequal relationships in global health. There needs to be a framework that people abide by. By restoring authority and the capacity to intergovernmental organizations like the World Health Organization for effective global health coordination, we can decolonize global health. Through the creation of agenda that will make global governance more democratic by the inclusion of grassroots voices and social movements and community-led projects, the people, and increased representation from lower middle income countries in working groups and conferences. The establishment of accountability for powerful global health actors is of the utmost importance in decolonization of global health. Promotion of diversity, equity, and inclusion while addressing power and resource imbalances through fundamental reforms aimed at wealth distribution will also aid in the decolonization of global health. So that is my presentation on Sri Lanka and the health problems they are experiencing and how decolonizing global health will hopefully lead to improved health outcomes for the country. Thank you.